This is Motovation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode. Have you ever stopped to question the beliefs or rules you've been taught to follow? Maybe there's that moment when what you were told to think about yourself or the world around you, and it just didn't sit right. If you're one of our listeners, likely you have. And today's guest might just feel like that kindred spirit in that regard. She knows exactly what it means to fight for freedom and reclaim her life. 17 years ago, Christina Lambert hit the brakes on a life controlled by others, walking away from the suffocating grip of the ATI cult, a place where religious fundamentalist authority ruled, independence was non-existent, and women were taught to obey without question. Just 1 year after leaving the deeply oppressed life, an arranged marriage, and with $250 in her pocket, she found herself on a motorcycle, a powerful symbol of the freedom she had fought so hard to claim. With the open road stretching ahead, she didn't just escape, she discovered a whole new way to live. That same call for independence later led her to buy a bus and embrace the wild, turning a simple road trip into a 40-day adventure of self-discovery. Her story is more than about survival. It's about owning your path, ripping up the rule book, and building a life fueled by independence and resilience. So if you're ready to be inspired to take the handlebars of your own life, stick around, because this is your motivation.
Christina,
wow,
welcome. What a intro.
I know, right? I'm sitting here like, damn, this girl's a badass.
Right?
As
Can you hear about yourself?
Sitting there thinking like, fuck, I am a badass. And that's exactly, before we hopped on here, you asked how we found you. And you were kind of saying, I'm working on building my following. And I'll just say right out of the gate, because I know people are going to be keen to follow your story. We'll make sure to have all the contact in the show notes. But on a simple scroll, I found myself stopped in my tracks because I'm seeing this woman in charge of her life, emulating empowerment, and at the same time seeing text of what you've overcome and seeing those words cult survivor. And I know for a lot of us, our only experience of what we know about that world is perhaps what we've read. Maybe we've seen a documentary, but not many of us really know what that lived experience embodies. So first of all, Christina, did you grow up or were you born into this, or where did it all begin? The origin story, really, so to speak.
The history, yeah. So I kind of have to back up all the way back to like before I was born briefly here, just to explain the whole spectrum of experience. My parents had been married previously together and divorced with 2 children already through that marriage. And then after a year apart, they ended up remarrying each other. And then I came along and then, more after me. So about that change, though, in their life prompted them to just look into new ways to raise their family. So they had started out pretty conservative already. So I remember like sitting around for family movie night or watching slides my dad would show up on the old projector screen, the kind of like it smells dusty. You see it floating through the air and like the lights up on the, we're all sitting around with popcorn. And like, I remember as a kid, like seeing this image flash up of like my older siblings, and they were dressed up for Halloween or they had Easter baskets. And I remember questioning that at a young age, saying like, well, I thought that was bad, but everybody in those pictures looks happy, and I didn't understand why we weren't allowed to do it. And so then as I grew up, more and more things began to get more and more strict. And I remember watching my parents change from different types of churches to like more conservative. And then, I was in high school, and story goes that I was kind of like pretty disobedient and rebellious to an extent anyways, because we were already a lot more strict than the other private school kids there. I had been homeschooled for most of my life. We traveled around with the military a lot, moved from place to place, and would be the new kid then if I did start school. So born in New York, we lived in Oklahoma, Ohio. I homeschooled all the way up through that period. 5th grade went to school, and then we moved to California. In California, I went to 6th grade and 9th grade to school. And in 9th grade, my parents had heard about this new homeschool program called ATI. And through a seminar they had gone to, which was a Bill Gothard seminar called The Institute in Basic Life Principles, these little red notebooks that everybody carry around. And I remember that, there had been an altercation. I had snuck out to go, I got my dad to drop me off at youth group and ended up meeting a guy there, and like got busted in the middle of it when my mom just like manifested in the corner. Like all of a sudden she's there, he gets caught, like kid with a hand in the cookie jar, like looking up like all of a sudden like ghost white. And I'm just like, I'll do homeschool again, like thinking it'll get me out of my punishment. But, I was still very naive. We had just kissed. That was all I'd ever, done at that point. I was still very young, probably about 14 or 15. And I remember going to school the next day and my mom showing up like halfway through the day, just all of a sudden, just right there again. And she just takes me away from, my friends, my boyfriend, empty your locker, we're done. And after that point, it was, we're back to homeschool again, which I was familiar with homeschool. But then they said, there's this seminar coming up. We're going to fly out to Knoxville, Tennessee for, and you're going to need a few outfits to wear there because there's a dress code. So we went shopping. And of course, like my taste and style, I'm like, I'm going to pick the flashiest, like long broomstick skirts and like all this stuff. And I've always been like a little bit rebellious, a little adventurous, just wanting to, play with the boys out in the streets and, baseball, hiking, horseback riding, anything I could do, rode my bicycle a lot, everything was always like, what's, ramping it, what's more adventurous, anything like that. So, for my mom to be like, you need to wear these dresses and they've got to be really long. I'm like, well, I can't do anything in dresses. Like, I'm not a big fan of dresses. I'd like dressing up occasionally, but we went shopping and I remember showing up to this seminar and there were thousands of people there. And I'm talking like just amazing number of people. This whole entire Knoxville Convention Center was just packed with families, and everybody's in navy and white, like white blouses that come all the way up, white and button-up shirts, nothing sleeveless, long flowy skirts on the ladies and pants on the boys. It was a different environment, to be sure.
I'm just going to pause you there because I'm just curious. Like, do you recall how you felt walking?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, what was the thoughts that you, like, what were the thoughts being said of like, what the fuck? Like, what was it that was, running and feeling?
So like already like, I remember in high school when I was going to school, I remember already being the odd kid because I wasn't allowed to wear as short as stuff as everybody else. I wasn't allowed to go to Halloween parties and date really, everything was like very secretive. Like if I wanted to try and get away with anything, right? Like all teenagers, but my parents were a lot more strict than all the other kids, even at private school. So already like we had a lot of pretty high standards of what we had to be like. And I still didn't understand the concept of like, well, why do we have to be so much different than everybody else? But then to go to something like this and I walk in thinking like, here I am coming from, seeing all these other kids that got to do everything I couldn't do and dress the way they wanted to. And then now seeing these other people that seemed happy about not being able to do all this stuff. And it was really weird because everybody is just outwardly, everybody just comes across as like very genuine, very sweet. And just, I think a lot of those people find a peace in order and in somebody leading them. They're all followers. I feel like a lot of them are lost and they're looking for something to fill a void in their life. and they find this and they think, this is a way of protecting my family from all these horrors in the world. So a lot of those people are there with good intentions. I just feel that there's a lot of their core beliefs and things that ended up happening within the system. I just finished a fantastic book called Disobedient Women. Can't remember the author's name right off the top of my head, but it's basically this woman who's a reporter goes and gathers all these incredible stories of all these women that were in ATI that were either sexually assaulted, molested, controlled, abused. And she shares all these tidbits of information about all this stuff that was going on, and everybody knew about it, and people just wanted to push it under the rug and hide it because we wanted to present to the world that we were this really amazing, peaceful people. And this is the life you need to have. And so I remember walking in, and it was just really unusual because here I am, a teenager, and I'm in my bold print colors already. I don't fit in. Everybody's just very sweet, and all the girls are just very meek and oh, so nice to meet you, and it's just, that's not me, So I remember feeling very out of place and just kind of oh my God, roll my eyes like a normal teenager, maybe I didn't think I grasped where this was heading. I thought in my mind, I thought this was just one event. I didn't realize I was about to become one of those kids, and so there was a disconnect, I think, at first. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Crazy.
Yeah, because how can you, right? When you don't have, even like you're saying, you grew up in that conservative family where there was a lot more strict rules. And so you were kind of othered in the sense with this group of kids at school, right? You didn't belong there. So it was kind of but my personality is a little bit more like them, but I just don't have those same opportunities. And then you go to this other side of the pendulum swing. So you're just having this new wild experience again, being now I'm othered in a completely now I'm the rebel. But they're all sweet and they're liking this. But how could you possibly think that this was the start of this entire, essentially, indoctrination and the slippery slope that is a cult as a young grade niner?
Yeah. And on top of that, I think what stood out the most of you saying walking into that room and realizing everyone's dressed the same and the visceral feeling of that and feeling othered, but at the same time telling your brain, well, they all seem really nice and really happy. This must, to some degree, be safe.
Yeah.
So you go to this. What happens next?
Okay. So, let's see. I remember going back home, and after that's when things really started changing. So we flew back to California. My dad ended up getting orders. He was going to be retiring from the Air Force soon. So he comes home and he's asking my mom, do you want to go to Colorado, Hawaii, or Ohio? And my mom's like, ooh, Ohio, I've got friends back there. And I'm just thinking oh my God, my life's just getting worse and worse,
Both of our lives are Ohio.
Yeah.
No,
we're
why
leaving
not
California.
Can we
all
get
my
over
friends
Hawaii?
back home. Right. Passing that up. All my friends back there in California were like, Ohio, isn't that where the potato comes from? And I'm, that's Idaho. So, we get back home and we started doing things every morning we had to wake up at 6:30 in the morning, come down to the kitchen table. My younger brother was the only one left at home at this point. My older siblings had married and gone to college and stuff. And they did things, it was pretty conservative for them. They went to, my older brother went to Purdue. My sister went to Oral Roberts University, which is a private college or a conservative college. And both of them had pretty normal lives. They did homeschool a little bit, but they ended up going to high school and having friends, going to college. And so it was almost like my parents were like, well, we're going to try again with this new family and we're going to do things differently, and see if, and I feel like maybe there was something in their life along the way that they just felt so overwhelmingly guilty for, or, they wanted to just make the world a better place. And they thought that this was the way. I don't know their reasoning, but there were good things that came out of it. So I remember getting up at 6:30 every morning, and we'd go down to the kitchen table with our Bibles, and we'd have to sit around, and like, we didn't want to be there. We were just groggy, tired, we're bringing our blankets in, and we're sitting around the table. And my dad would be like, we're going to go read a proverb from like a chapter of this book from the Bible every morning. And we're going to go around the table, and everybody's going to read, 5 verses, and we're just going to go to the next person. And then we would go back around and be like, this is what we took out of it, So there was a lot of interaction. So it was a very positive thing. Like, looking back on it, that was very special and sweet. But at the time, like, I was kicking and screaming, I'd mumble my way through the verses and try to come up with something as quick as I could to say, so I didn't have to like talk in depth on anything. Then we'd pull out our homeschool books, and it was then after that we started going to more of these seminars, Bill Gothard seminars, and each time we'd come home, there was a cleansing of the house. Like, my parents, one time, I had a feeling, we'd just gotten back, and I had a feeling, because they started talking about rock music. I had a feeling my parents were going to come and take my music away, because I was listening to contemporary Christian rock, and they had talked about in the Cult, they talked about that rock music, or music that had a beat, like on the 1 and the 2 and the 4 instead of the 1 and 3, or had sensual voice sounding, or whatever the content was. All that stuff was bad and evil, and it evoked, sensuality and lustful thoughts and evil thoughts and stuff. So all that had to be removed. And then our movies got whittled down, PG sometimes would be allowed. A lot of Disney movies weren't allowed, nothing with magic or, witches or evil spirits or whatever. So even like Cinderella, I think I remember watching it as a little kid, but then that got thrown away when we went through the cleanse. So there was a lot that I missed out on in life. A lot of things like, TV, movies. A lot of my friends, even nowadays, somebody would be like, "Oh yeah, Ghostbusters." Never saw it. It's such a classic movie, I guess, but I've still, to this day, haven't gotten a chance to catch up with that one. There's a lot of music from that whole period of my childhood up until about 30, when I got out of the Cult. Maybe just a few years before that, I used to sneak and listen to the radio. But during that whole time, like just growing up, it was maybe a few Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith songs. But then after the Cult, there was nothing. It was soundtracks to movies or hymns. And so there's a whole generation of my life that was left out. So things started getting cleansed out of the home, and, more conservative. And moving back to Ohio was a good way for them to be able to isolate us even more. And we found a church where it was just all people from the same homeschool movement. And, there were some really nice people in there, but a lot of them all had the same beliefs. So then when you're isolated like that, you're able to be controlled more. The whole purpose of even like, I guess, let me retrain that thought here. In history, a lot of times the way that a person is able to conquer a whole nation is that they divide the country against each other, divide it into smaller and smaller and smaller groups that can be easily managed and controlled. And then you turn them against each other. And so that's basically what this whole cult began to do, is it created this judgmental attitude towards the world, but it also created a fear. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen the movie The Village, M. Night Shyamalan. So the storyline is a little bit of a spoiler, but there's this here. So if you ever go to see it, but there's this whole storyline of this village of people that are afraid of these monsters in the forest, and it keeps them contained. And all along, the leaders of the village have been making and manifesting this thing out in the forest that wasn't actually a threat. And I won't give away all of it, but they used that to be able to control the people and create fear. And so that's what there was a lot, is I started to get worried about, well, I can't go anywhere by myself because something bad might happen. All these people out there, around every turn, I could be mugged or raped, or, something bad is going to happen. So in the Institute, Advanced Training Institute is what it stands for, ATI. So if I use interchangeable words, sometimes it's just out of habit. But in there, they talked a lot about an umbrella structure of authority where the church was directly under God, and then the father of a marriage and a family would be under the church. And then underneath that is the woman and the children, so that the man is able to go directly to God and the church, but even the woman has to go through him to be able to speak, to be able to make her own decisions or to do anything. And this whole idea is that if you stepped out from underneath the umbrella that's over you, your authority. So in my case, as unmarried, I was under my parents. If I stepped out from that, I'd be in danger. That's the symbol of this rain coming down, of all these things happening out there, because I'd be out from under authority. So whatever rules they placed on us there, it created a fear of, if I leave, then all this bad stuff's going to happen, so it
almost
really,
like guaranteed to a certain extent. Was it, something that I was reading up on it's almost like you're not only it might, but you're actually inviting it in by going out from under the safety of that umbrellaed code. And so, it's like it's that again, like you're asking for it, you're bringing it in, you're inviting it in.
Yeah, that's exactly it too. It was like you open the door, and allow. So if I was bad and I'd watched a movie of something scary, I was opening the door to evil spirits. I'd be out from underneath, and I'd not only get myself in danger, I might even endanger my family. So that mindset, really did create a lot of fear. And within all of that, I ended up, kind of like really starting to lose myself. I used to be so adventurous, and I started to become very fearful. And through the church that we had ended up joining, I did make friends there, but nobody really seemed to see things the way that I did. I remember, a couple of my closest friends there, and these are the only people I was allowed to associate with or talk to, right? It was these people at church. I wasn't allowed to have a job outside the home. I couldn't go back to school. I couldn't go to college. Women didn't need to go to college. They didn't need to have an education or a job, because they were just going to stay at home under their father's authority until they married. And then if they married, then they were now under their husband's authority. So, he would be the provider for the family, and he would be the one to make all the decisions. And basically all I needed to do was cook and clean and take care of family, and, whatever else I could do as a homemaker. So I had lost a lot of hope, because originally I had dreams of becoming, a traveler or a fashion designer or, interior designer, something. I just imagined myself walking up the steps of some building in New York with my designs in hand, being able to do this. And what's so cool is this has actually now happened for me, that I've actually been able to do that and be in New York on a design job. And, just like, it's so crazy how I've been able to like pursue and manifest that. But at the time, I'd lost all hope. It was like, I felt very trapped, and I didn't totally agree with a lot of the mindsets, because, as I looked out, driving to the store, meeting people at the grocery store, my cashier or whatever, anybody I talked to on the outside seemed nice, but there was still in the back of my mind that fear of like, what's going to happen? Like, I didn't know that I was legal at 18 years old, or that I could run away. I didn't know where I would go or who I would even talk to, because the only people I knew were in this organization. So my mindset was, if I try to leave, then I'll either get, raped or murdered or mugged, or somebody's going to turn me back in to my family and the church and I'll be shamed. They would have somebody from the church that had done something in the past that had been wrong. Like, we had a man that was caught looking at child porn. And like, that's the type of stuff, you really need to alert people of. There was another young man who actually molested somebody that I know that's very close to me. And he was just slapped on the hand and, and this was a child, somebody who was very young at the time, and he was 20 years old, and they never reported it, or, it gone unnoticed, and they were going to try and cover it up. But thankfully, it was brought to court, but even still, he didn't get the sentencing he deserved. And, a lot of that was going on the inside. So seeing even some of the things that happened, the way that people treated them and shamed them in front of the church, but yet they never got punished. It was weird. It was just, there was a lot of questioning going on. But again, the people around me seemed very happy and very naive. And I know that since then, a lot of them have come around, but there's still people that are in it that are still just as naive and brainwashed.
You know what I find fascinating as you share is just how long your knowing knew that you were out of alignment. Even when you speak to those early teenage years and those callings within you of like, this doesn't feel like who I am at my core. And then because of the byproduct of the environment, you're trying to assimilate because at first your family's telling you this is safe. The environment's telling you it's safe, but it's so fascinating to me. And I can't wait till we get to that pivot moment, because I love that you're like, I did end up on those stairs and I did have that moment. But obviously before then, you go from parent to marriage, not a marriage that was necessarily your choice either, but this kind of authoritative next step. So how does that come into play? And then ultimately, how do you get out?
This was a very monumental, but the original out story is really epic. It's crazy how it all came to be. But let me back up for a second here. I think that church, and through all that, I'd found some outlets to be able to kind of stay distracted and active in the community so that I could pass the time until the right man came along. I'd started doing this program. I'd started teaching Sunday school, and then the ATI came out with this new program called Character First, where we would go in public and private schools and teach a character quality for each month. And it was good basic ideas, but everything was based on, again, biblical principles. So it was really like using the same things that they were using in their organization, but in a, non-denominational or segregated or whatever way. And we would teach in these schools, and it gave me an outlet of being able to go into the schools and meet these little kids and encourage them and try to be a hope for them and stuff. So it was a really fun time for my life. And I think I really got like to where I was like, okay, if this is my cage, at least I can be happy in it and try to do what I can in it to help other people and, be something. And, I felt kind of like I was giving in, just kind of giving up. And around that time, I still had like a little bit of like, man, I really wish like somebody would just come save me. And there had been this guy that had started coming to our church that I ended up kind of like clicking with. And we secretly were passing notes and ended up actually kissing at one point, all, unbeknownst to everybody else. And right about that time, my parents, I remember the day I was in the family room of our house living in Ohio. They had bought this horse farm to kind of settle down. We were away from everybody and, 22 acres, really awesome land. I finally got like a horse, closest thing to a motorcycle at the time I could have. Right. And I ended up I was in the family room. My parents, Christina, we need to talk to you. I'm like, that guy got feeling like, oh my God, they found out about this guy. That's what I was thinking at first. And they call me into my room and they're both sitting on my bed. And I'm just like, walk in like, this is awkward, like, so I'm standing there and they're like, well, we have some news for you. Somebody's come and asked to court you. Now, courtship is like, you're basically like entering a contract to agree to marry this person. And you're not going to call it off, like, unless if anything like absolutely terrible comes out, like, they're a murderer or whatever. I don't know. So I'm standing there and they're telling me this, like, somebody's asked to court you. And I'm just like, oh my God, I think I know who it is. Oh, geez. Like, I didn't even like this guy. Like, he was nice and he had tried to talk to me a couple of times, but like guys and girls didn't talk in our church. So it was really awkward. And I was just like, I don't know, you're a little awkward. He was telling me about butterflies and photography or something. I don't know. And I was just kind of like,
sexy.
Talk to this guy. Like, I'm just not interested. Right. So when they told me who, it was, they had said, well, we've already all talked about it. We met with the pastors. They've talked about, everybody approves. But, like, you got to be a part of this. So like, you've got the final say. And I just like, okay. So they're like, well, why don't you take a day at least to think about it and just come back and let us know. So I was like, okay, great. I'm supposed to take a day to think about it. Like, in my mind, I'm already like, I really like this other guy, but I can't tell them about this other guy because they would never approve. And then here's this option here, this might be a ticket out of this because I don't know this guy. Maybe he's cool, So I was like,
yeah.
In my mind, I'm thinking like rationally, what do I do? Or do I sit back and be like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to be an old maid and sit in my house and like homemake under my father for, until the next.
How old are you at this time? How old are you?
At this time, I was 19. So,
wow.
And you're already think like, am I going to be an old maid if I say no?
This mentality. They had already told another man that had come to ask. No, they said they had already turned down 2 other people that had come along and said, we think we're a good match for your daughter. And they had already said like, no. And they didn't tell me about it at all. I had a suspicion about one. My best friend and I dug through my dad's mail and found the letter he'd written. He was actually from Canada. He was interested. And
if you're out there, Christina is free bird.
Yeah, he sent the horses
on the open. Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, that was cool, but they turned him down. And then I wasn't supposed to know about it, right? So this guy comes along, and it's like, all right, well, my options are pretty slim. I go to this tiny little church. There's like no other eligible men there. This guy's from Michigan. He came down to our church. He spies me out, keeps an eye on me, starts talking to everybody about me and, everybody behind my back about like whether I'd be a good match, and everybody thinks it's a good deal. I'll go with it. Fine. Okay. So it's, I took a little walk on the property to just come up with my decision for sure out in nature and just be like, you know what? I think this is better than staying at home. I'll take my chances. So I go back and I tell my parents, all right, fine. I made my decision. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to call him and tell him. And I don't think I realized like how quickly everything would move after that. I thought like, okay, like it'll be a slow thing, but they instantly hand me the phone. They're like, oh, he wants to talk to you. And I'm like, well, I don't want to talk to him. Like, they're like, no, you need to talk to him. You guys are courting now. I'm like, well, I don't want to talk to him. They're like shoving the phone in my face at this point. And I'm just like, and then he's like, hello, Christina, and we start out with things like, what's your middle name? What's your favorite color? Trying to get to know each other. Yeah. And over a period of time, it's like, meanwhile, I still have this guy that I'm like passing notes with that I'm like, oh my God, I got to cut this off with him. I'm heartbroken.
Right.
I don't
Right.
Because, like, I actually had feelings for this other guy.
Yeah.
So, we start talking and, get to know each other a little bit. And I'm like, this seems like cool. Okay. I think I can go along with this. And the other guy ended up having to cut that off. That was heart-wrenching. That's a whole nother story, but ended up, agreeing to marry this guy. So 3 months later, he formally proposes with a ring. And at that point, he was still in Michigan. So, we were writing back and forth and talking on the phone, trying to get to know each other. And you have to like be able to say, all right, I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to try to put my all into this and make this work, get to know this person. It's a nice, he seems nice enough. But he was one of the charter families of the ATI organization. And I didn't know this. So in reality, I was stepping from one boiling pot into an even hotter boiling pot, so it was pretty intense. And so
because they would have been really restrictive, correct? Like if it's a chartered family, it's like a family high up on the
families, part of the
founding families. So they fundamentalist, very by the book, because they're a representation of the,
Yeah. So it was just like, and I had no idea, and it's like, but I mean, he seemed nice enough. And so, of course we like go honeymoon, and, it's funny is like, they always say like the body keeps a score, and you really need to like trust your body and stuff too. But even on the honeymoon, like I was sick before the wedding. I kept getting like my period every 2 weeks. It was crazy. And my body was just like, I had lost a lot of weight, which, that's usually what happens anyways before a wedding. But like, even my body was like crying out like, hey, like this is weird. And so I was getting my period every 2 weeks. And then on the honeymoon, I ended up getting like an ear infection, was in bed for like half a day. But before the wedding though, as it's like into the courtship, before we even got engaged, the young guy that I was talking to originally, that, we had this thing going, he felt so bad about everything. He felt like he needed to go forward and tell, that we had this secret relationship. I think he was probably hoping it would call it off. And I remember my parents having this emergency meeting and like, what happened? And I was so terrified of being shamed in front of the church. I just was like, oh, it was just a kiss and he stole it, like trying to get out of it. I'm just 19, remember? So I'm like just a teenager. I'm trying to get out of this like embarrassment. And so they called this emergency meeting, and my, courted, husband to be, whatever. He's there. The pastors are there. His family's there. My dad's there. I'm not there. And they're all having this discussion, sitting together saying, all right, well, how serious is this? Is she still a virgin? And, they were like, yes, she's still a virgin, because that was the biggest thing for them, was that like, I had to be this pure, sacrifice for this marriage, whatever, I don't know. And so they came back, and that was their biggest question is, are you still a virgin? And I was like, yes, I am. So, the marriage went on. So my wedding day comes, all the preparations leading up to it were, I was just kind of like, whatever, I'm just going to send an invite out to all these people. And my parents are like, try to keep it small, try to keep it cheap. Got to the wedding dress, and, both mothers wanted to come with me, and they're like, oh my God, getting all excited. And I'm just kind of like, whatever. And they're like, oh, this is the dress. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'll wear it. It wasn't even what I would have picked, but it was like, it was loud and it was decent enough. So it was this big, like half a cathedral length train, big, lace sleeves and very modest. Everything had to be covered. And wedding day comes, and I remember standing there, and at this point, it's kind of like, you are a little excited about the whole thing. We'd started to get a little bit like flirty, and actually had like snuck a couple kisses and you're excited because you're a teenager, all your hormones are going and stuff like this. I think I was like 20 or 21 by the time I was married.
And we still live in a society that romanticizes the hell out of weddings, and no matter what culture you're in, and so or religion or whatever. So there's also that would have been in there of like, oh, this is a big thing and an exciting thing, regardless, to some extent, right?
Right. Yeah, it like build anticipation.
Yeah,
and all your friends are excited. The whole church was watching. It was like one of the first courtships in our whole church, so everybody was watching. So it ends up the day of the wedding, like 600 people are there to watch this whole thing.
Whoa!
And standing room only. We had done the whole wedding on a budget of $3,000, like including
You're like the royal family getting married.
Yeah, right.
This is like the royal
it was
wedding.
A big deal. Yeah. There were a lot
right, because he was one of those families too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because of who his family would have been, it would have been also, I would assume, quite a big deal.
Yeah. And, this was all before like projecting live weddings and stuff too. So we're talking 2000 was when I was married. So by the year 2000, so it was in March. So he had come the previous fall. I think I just turned 20 while we were recording it. I think I'd have to do the math, but anyway, so we were married the spring of 2000. God, it's so long ago. That's crazy. And the wedding day comes, all these people out there, and I'm in my dress, and we're at the doors of the auditorium. They're getting ready to pull them open. I walk out, and my dad's there, and he takes my arm and he looks down at me. You don't have to do this, right? And I was like, what the fuck? Now?
What about last night, Dad? What about last night when I was in my
It's like 600 people out there.
He knew too. That was that. Then obviously he knew too, and that was his like maybe potentially. You can never jump in the dad's shoes, but like it feels like that weight was on him as well. He felt the weight of that undertow of him being like, something's not right here. I have to say something too. I have to, because like, why else would he even,
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't really think about it like that, but yeah, you're right. It must have been. And I felt like in some ways too, I kind of felt like, it was like, almost like, this is just in case it doesn't work out kind of thing. I can say, I told you or whatever, but like in some ways too, but I guess standing there, and I thought, well, I don't really feel like I have many other options. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to do, go back to the way things were. And that wasn't working. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? So it's like, let me just try this. It's new. And we'll see how it goes. It could be an adventure. So, I walk down the aisle, I say yes. And like instantly honeymoon, and I'm pregnant right away because, of course, virgin. That whole night was interesting, by the way.
I can imagine. I bet, right? Yeah. That's another episode.
Virgins.
This is going to be like our chapter 1 of many chapters that we have with you.
So, I ended up pregnant. And what's funny is even in that stage too, I remember we were really struggling financially as a young couple. He was without a job. We're living in this small little duplex where you can hear the people downstairs and every single thing they do. And, you could smell whatever they're cooking or smoking up through the floorboards. And it was like, I'm getting sick, from all that. But my first baby, I ended up miscarrying. And that was pretty epic as well, too, because that was like, I went through the actual like delivery of this little baby. I mean, just as small as the tip of my thumb, but it was like an actual delivery of everything. And like, that was pretty devastating. And I felt like it was my fault because during the pregnancy, I'm like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this. I don't want to do this. I don't want my body to change. I don't want to not be able to travel, and I felt like that all was like part of the reason that then that gift was taken away, and it's like, it really is like children really are like a precious thing to have. And I felt like it was my fault for a while, and that was really hard to go through, but I felt very alone too. And it took a while. It was probably about 6 months later, I'm guessing, that I ended up, I think it was 6 to 9 months later, I think I was expecting again. And this was my firstborn child now. So she's amazing. So she was born in 2001. So we're married in 2000, miscarriage in 2000. 2001, I had a baby. 2002, I had a baby. 2003, I was pregnant. By the beginning of 2004, I had another baby. And at this point, my doctors are looking at him and they're saying, her body cannot handle having any more kids. You know, she, like, if you, at this rate, like, she needs a break. And the ATI organization didn't believe in any kind of birth control because they felt like it was like killing an unborn baby and all. And so I finally was able to find something that they had, like an IUD or something, where it was able to say it just stops your period. So I was like, okay, well, that qualifies, right? You know, because like this is for medical reasons. Like I can't get pregnant again, obviously, like this whole other way isn't working. But in the organization, like the whole idea is that having as many children as you can is like equipping your own little army of like people to go out into the world to like change the world. And what's interesting too on that concept is like the mass size of the organization. They had institute buildings, so like these campuses in different states throughout the country, but they also had places in other countries like Russia. And they would go over there frequently with students and have students working with other kids in the community there. I remember being at one of these training centers in Indianapolis. I was there for a music course that they offered. Like everything's segregated, right? Boys and girls are separated, rooms and everything. You're wearing your modest clothing the whole week. You're there, you're doing your classes because these are things offered that not all the homeschooling groups get. So it's music, and music is okay for a homemaker, right? So I'm at this course, and I remember something really interesting happened. I'm going through line, and one of the cooks or guards, one of the men that was there, because we're talking about these training centers were like old hotels that were converted, and they had guards and locks on doors. So you weren't allowed to leave unless you were buzzed out and there was somebody with you or whatever, or it was a group thing, and nobody could come in without being buzzed in. So they even had within this training center, they had these rooms called prayer rooms where they would lock a disobedient student away for days at a time and only give them one change of clothes, a Bible, and their meals through the door. And that was it. And like these
Solitary
kids would have to go stand in the room all until, all
to a
until their
child,
will
to
was
a
broken.
child. Yeah.
Right.
A
So
child on
going to
top
the
of
center,
that. Wow.
and it's crazy the authority that this structure had, because I was there at the seminar. I remember all these weird things, and I remember going through the line, and this guy grabs me and he says, "Hey, you and you," to this other girl and me, "you'll sit at the head table tonight." And I was like, "Oh, that's really weird. Okay, why did you pick us? You know, me and this other girl with me." And we go sit up at the head table, and there's delegates from China and Russia and all these other countries sitting at the table with Mr. Gothard. And he had hand selected like the prettiest girls from the auditorium and put them all at the table up there with all these delegates. And they were talking about opening and working in relation to these with these other countries. But then a lot of the members of ATI were also very high political figures as well. And I can recall even at periods where we would be doing canvassing for these candidates that were on one side, an extreme side in belief, and we'd have to call and be, "Hi, I'm calling for Representative so-and-so, and we need your vote." Like they would enlist all these homeschool organizations to push their agendas too. So it was really interesting looking back how much, women were. Wow, right? So, marriage, and then like wrapping up to when I finally got out. The most interesting moment. Again, leading up to that moment, it was just constantly like, I'm just going to have to make the most of this. And I thank God for my kids, because that's what kept me alive all those years too. But I didn't want my kids think that their value as a woman was anything less than deserving of the absolute best and of their own freedom and independence. I think that them seeing me locked in a situation like that and submissive and giving up my own will and acting happy, as children, they're going to mimic what we do. And that was the hardest part of it, was thinking that my girls are going to have to be raised the same exact way. And they're going to have the same kinds of dreams and aspirations as I do, or their own, hopefully. So I'm driving down the road in my minivan one day and thinking about this, deep in thought. I'd gotten permission from my husband to go to this baby shower for another woman in the church. And I'm driving down the road and deep in thought, and all of a sudden this motorcycle, I'd just seen it moments ago, pulling out of a place. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, that would be so cool to ride one of those. Well, he pulls up beside me, and all of a sudden he slows back down to my window. Of course, I look over and I'm like, oh, that looks like so much fun. And then he pops this big wheelie and he throws it back down. Well, this guy's like the epitome of everything the cult was not allowing me to be or be around, right? He had tattoos, ripped like the cut off sleeves. There was no visor on his helmet. He had sunglasses on underneath. And, he's riding this clapped out old Gixxer, like chains, like slapping around. Tires are probably half bald, right? And he's like, pops this wheelie, slams it back down, and then like waves to me, and he like taps the back seat, like, you want to ride? And I'm just like, oh man, like, no, I can't. I'm married, And he's like, shoos that away, and again. So I'm like, the way I describe this to people is like, have you ever read those choices books where you're like, turn to page, 56,
yes.
if you want to go this way?
Yeah. I like lived for those when I was a tween.
So I'm like, what would happen if I just like decide to get on the back of this bike? What? So I was like, I can't, I've got this dress on, and I'm like showing him like the skirt in the window, like, and he's like, oh, come on. And he's this like firmly pats the seat. And I'm like, all right, fine. You talked me into it, right? So I pull the minivan
yes, I
over.
love this story so much already.
I pull the minivan over. I hop out in my like long skirt, and I'm like, it's full enough I can like climb on the back, right? And I'm like, all right, the only way I'm going to do this is if I can at least wear the helmet. Because I'm thinking, if I like get killed, like my kids, they're going to be like, she did what? How did she die? Like they have no idea. So I hop right on the back, and he just like quickly, he's like, oh, okay, let's go.
He's like, I can't believe this worked. Wow. Ooh, can't believe this actually worked.
So he takes off, he like just fly. And, this is that epic moment you all remember, like your first ride when like,
yeah.
Feel everything. Just, I'm not even going to go to this because you're closing your eyes,
Yeah.
And it was just incredible. And I'm cheesing, and I'm like, then all of a sudden, oh my God, they're all waiting for me at the party, and my family's going to miss me. Like they're going to be like, there's going to be this lag in time. Like I got to get back. So I'm like, hey, I got to go back. So he like takes me back, and he, as I'm climbing out, because I'm in such a hurry, like freaked out all of a sudden, I jump off, but I didn't know. And I got off on the wrong side of the bike. And of course my inner leg is exposed because my skirt right, touches against the exhaust pipe. And there's this like giant burn mark on my leg now. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to hide this? Like, and I got to get to this destination. So I was like, I'll be fine. So I wave it off. He's like, well, really quick, here's my number if you ever want to ride again. So I took his number really quick, jump in my car, and I go. And I'm like, the whole time I'm at this event, I'm like keeping my dress down, and I'm like,
it's really painful too. Like, anyone knows it has a burn. Yeah. That's wild that even, because I've burned that
I just
part on the pipe, and it was like, that's like even in itself. And like you said, of like, my husband's going to see this. How do I explain a burn mark on my leg going to a baby shower when.
So I hid it the whole time.
Wow.
I'm thinking the whole entire time I'm sitting here like, yeah, I just had the time of my life. And now I've got this like reminder that I've got to hide. So I finally, I'm like, I get home, I walk in the front door, give my husband a little peck on the mouth really quick. And I'm like, I head straight for the studio where my ironing is, my sewing machine, all that stuff. I head straight for the studio. I turn on the iron. I get it really nice and hot. Lean down. I press the iron to my leg so that V mark from the iron would be near the burn mark, just to make it look like the iron had burned.
Wow, that speaks so much to the fear. Holy fuck. That speaks so much.
100%. That's what
and screamed. And like, that was my alibi, because I just, I couldn't let him know. I couldn't let anybody know.
Full body. Yes, Chrissy. I got full body chills, because what Chrissy said, I think we almost want to pause that of like the level of commitment to sticking to the story and to covering tracks and is that you knew that you needed to go in and self harm with an iron to make sure that like the level of like fear, the level of indoctrination, the level of control, the level of everything is that you just knew that was the next step that you just had to do. And the level of what was going on in your survival, the level, because if you asked a room full of women, could you do this to yourself? They'd be like, no, it's like, I would have to just say the thing. I would just have to tell the story. There's no way I could go in. But it was like, you had at that point learned that burning yourself with an iron was a more realistic choice than saying out loud what had happened, or even trying to make up a story.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it was a lot, and it was funny too, is I remember the next week, it's Sunday, the next week or two or whatever, at our church. By this time, my husband had pulled us out of our ATI church, and his brother had started doing a home church out of his basement. So now there's even smaller circle of people around me. And I was really like, I was like underweight, pale. I was trying to tan just so I could like get some vitamin D, and just really not happy, so that was like the first chance for me to really feel freedom and happiness for a moment. And all I could think about after that was like, oh, I want to do that again. Like, I can't imagine never being able to do that again. And so I started studying all these books and like reading about motorcycles and being like, one of these days I want to learn to ride a motorcycle. Like, I'm sure if I talk about it enough, I can get my husband on board. And then he kind of was like, that could be kind of fun. And he starts thinking about it a little bit and stuff. I don't know if to this day, I don't think he's ridden, but I think it was enough of a seed planted that I was like, maybe one day I'll be able to do this. I can talk him into it. And, there's just kind of, all of my finances were being controlled through him. So it wasn't like I could save up for it and get it on my own. I'd started a upholstery business, and it had started growing so much that he quit his job and was working with me in my business, which was even harder now, because it's like I'm seeing him 24/7 now, no break. Right. And just this person that you tolerate, you try to be friends with, you have a relationship with, but at the same time, you don't feel that spark or that like real passion with this person. And just talk about how trapped you feel, having to please your husband, having to do everything for your husband, serve your husband his food before everybody else, and here all of a sudden I've got this like burning desire to do something for me. And more of that thought of like, my kids, so they want to be free too, I'm sure. So I started thinking about like, maybe I could get a divorce. And it wasn't long after that, I ended up getting an upholstery job where it was this big commercial job I was doing for an orthopedic place in Cincinnati there. And one of the guys that was working there was being really nice and helping out. And he's like, hey, we're getting this group together after hours on Thursday night to go rock climbing if you'd like to try. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to try. Because that's just me. I'm like, I want to try that. And well, I'll have to ask
for adventure at this point, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll have to ask my husband and see. So I ended up reaching out to him. Well, I went home. I asked my husband. My husband's like, I guess you can go, but I don't think I want to go because I'm not really interested in that. So I ended up going, and this was the first time I really got to know and meet and hang out with people outside of the cult in, all those years. So this is 2007. So, we got into the cult around 95 probably, or 94. And here I am at 29, about to turn 30, and gone and hung out with these people rock climbing, and they were just so cool. Everybody was so nice. And this young man starts talking to me about, wow, your situation sounds really interesting. That's not right. Like, you need to take care of yourself. You need to be safe. You need to be happy. That's emotional abuse and control. And, kind of gave me some hope on the outside, and ended up being a source that when I was finally ready to leave, I could reach out to him, and he helped me through a lot of it. So that was pretty awesome. But it ended up, I did reach back out to that guy with the bike and wanted a second ride. It was probably before I ended up I'm trying to remember the order of events. It was probably before I ended up getting that job. But when I reached back out for the second ride, thinking like, oh, I'm just going to hit this guy up. I'm going to go for a ride. It's going to be awesome. I'll arrange it so that it's around the time of another sewing delivery, like for a client, that I'm going to drop the stuff off. We had one cell phone between the two of us. So I'll take the cell phone with me, and I'll go for this ride. I'll have the guy meet me near my client's house, so I can just 10 or 15 minutes on the bike, whatever it'll take. So I ended up going and meeting with this guy. We go for a ride. It's a good ride through the countryside. And then he ends up pulling over, and he's like, I need a smoke. And I ended up getting raped during that trip. And then, yeah, that was pretty serious. Like, we started talking at first, and then it was like I started noticing like something he was saying, and I was like, I think I gotta go. I gotta get back now. And I started walking back up, and next thing you know, I'm like, there's this man, and he's pressed me against the concrete wall of this bridge. And I'm just like, the only person I'd been with up to that point was my husband. And I was a virgin to my wedding night. Like, I'd never experienced anything like this. And I didn't know, people could be like, I knew there were bad people out there, but like, I always had the benefit of the doubt. And after, just what I'd seen and this person being nice, I thought maybe they were cool. I didn't think this way. And so then I get back to my car, and I'm driving home, and I'm thinking like, this is the ultimate shame. Like, in my community, you're an adulterer, you're an outcast, you have to wear the scarlet letter, so going forward, it was just a lot of confusion and a lot of like self-discovery too, and trying to think through that, and not realizing like, and calling that rape, but feeling like it was my fault because I was out from underneath that umbrella of authority,
I was just going to say, it ends up being that whole, what they talk about will happen, and how there's so many layers of the cruelty that moment towards you. I'm so sorry that was your experience. It's so cruel on so many levels.
What's really interesting is, it's funny the way the universe works. Like, as here I am, where things have been just absolutely amazing, and I can't even describe like how incredible everything's been opening up for me lately. But I ended up getting a phone call this last summer, hello it was actually a text. Sorry, I'd go back. I still have the text actually on my phone. I have to remember this. I got a text from him, and he's like, is this still Christina's number? I'm in jail, and I got shot last year, and I almost died. And I've been doing a lot of thinking. And he's like, I wanted to reach out to you to apologize. And I remember holding the phone like that day, like, oh my gosh, I'm like shaking, this is crazy. I had just gotten back from that 44-day trip and been doing all the traveling. So I'd really done a lot of soul searching and had really thought a lot about things and felt like it was my time to share my story. So I texted him back and I said, yes, it is. I said, could you elaborate? And he says, well, I feel really bad for what I did to you. And I need you to be more specific. And I called him to the point of, I want you to call it what it is, in a way. I wanted to hear him actually say it and acknowledge and not just be like, oh, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to see if he was genuinely sorry. And seeing it, I realized like I had no feeling anymore. Seeing that in writing, I realized I'd healed from that and let go of it and understood it as part of my story that brought me to where I am. And I love who I am now. And all of those trials and adversities that I'd gone through, like brought me to that point to become who I am and to be able to have free kids and be myself free. So I texted him back and I said, yes, I forgive you. Like being able to let go of that was huge too, because the impact that that can have, realizing that this person made a bad decision as well at the time. And unfortunately it did hurt somebody else, but he's been hurting and paying the price for it ever since, apparently. And like, I didn't even need that satisfaction. It was just realizing like that this person is at their healing journey and they need healing now. And now it's my turn to let go and say, like, that's not in my control. I don't need to control this person. So yeah, beauty does come out of ashes for him to be able to
I was going to say there's such a statement that comes to mind and a quote that I hear all the time that I'll butcher. So I'll just kind of verbalize the essence, but the most beautiful people in the world that can have the most impact in the world are the ones that have known that great pain and suffering, but are still able to see the beauty in the world and what you're able to like project and the healing that you're able to do in the world. And that's clearly your superpower, because this is such a story. There's so much bravery and vulnerability. That's something that Lori and I are constantly unpacking within ourselves. How do we show up more and more as vulnerable as possible? Because to your point, like almost like the isolation you experience is such symbolism for the cages that we put ourselves in without it. And the more people are willing to say, this is my experience, this was my pain, this was my joy, and that deep soul recognition that can happen within each other, the inspiration that can happen within each other. I know even you're going to share the adventures that you've been on since you've made these incredible freeing decisions for yourself. But I just want to honor the fact that there's so much bravery in the path that you are now following. And I'm just full of gratitude that there's people like yourself in the world that are willing to be the ones that are like, I'm going to do the scary thing and share my story. There's so much fucking power in our stories.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And each person's story is so beautifully different too. And it reminds me, like the illustration I use a lot is that I think it's our privilege as a human being to experience the full spectrum of life, to say that we have the ability that we can say that this terrible, bad time, this thing that I've had to go through just means that now I can experience the absolute extreme joys that come on the other side of it. One of my favorite quotes is by Will Smith says it in this video presentation. I don't know if he's the original author of it, but he says the greatest things in life are on the other side of fear. And it reminds you too of like that whole contrast of fear and failure, success and happiness and peace, and that you have to sometimes go through, not around, to be able to receive the absolute joys of life and to experience everything to the fullest. So again, it was like that was a motivation, a kind of a wake up for me too. But in that moment, I knew that I needed to do some changes to my life. I really needed to get out. And I'd seen a billboard somewhere along the road that was like, divorce is $250. So I was like, okay, all I need is $250. That's all I got to save up. And then I can get this divorce. And at the time, of course, he's controlling all the finances and the business is bringing in money. So I remember one time getting this job done and I looked down at, I'm writing out the receipt for it. And, the total comes to 250. And I was like, hey, you think I could like keep this for some spending money on the side, versus some little things here or there if I want to get a surprise or a gift? And he's like, I suppose so. So I was like, cool. So I held on to that for a while. And then the night came finally after keeping up and talking with my friend for quite a while, my new friend, the one from the orthopedic place. Got to that point where it was like one night he's unable to sleep and he goes downstairs and he's just like, something feels off lately. And I'm like, okay, go ahead. And he starts talking and I knew this was the moment. This is it. I got to say it. Like I had already once before earlier on in some of our conversations said like, hey, this isn't working out. I'm not happy. I don't want to do this. He's like, just give it more time, give it a chance. And I told him, I was like, I'm leaving. And he got mad and he threw his wedding ring at me and immediately calls his family. Oh, like, I don't know what to do. Right. So he's calling them. And within minutes, like the whole entire church had known that not only like was I leaving, that I had cheated too. In my mind, he had brought up, he's like, did you cheat? And in my mind, the way that I'd been raised was like, well, yes, that was cheating because I went off with this man to ride a motorcycle and he ended up raping me. I didn't see it as rape. Yeah, and I didn't understand that. And so, to me, that was before he and I had talked and I had told him that I wasn't happy. So in my mind it was like it was before I told him I was done and didn't want to. So that night, for me, it was just like easier just to be like, well, yes, I did, I guess, And so he called the church and he told everybody, well, she's cheated, she's leaving, this and that. So I ended up deciding I was going to run up and visit my sisters, let him take the kids to his brother's for a couple of days while I go up. And I called my friend as I'm leaving. I'm like, I'm doing it. I left. And he's like, what, now? And I'm like, yeah, I just left. And he's like, well, what's next? I'm like, I'm going to drive and see my sister in Michigan. He's like, now there's a snowstorm outside. Like it was the big blizzard in February, Cincinnati, Ohio, or we were living in Lebanon, Ohio. And I'm like, I'm going to drive up to Michigan in the snowstorm. I'm like, it'll be fine. If I make it to,
you're like, I'm leaving a cult. This is nothing. Like, this is nothing.
I had 3 kids without any painkillers or epidural or anything. I burned myself out of iron.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a fucking cakewalk.
So I ended up being like, if I can make it past Dayton, then it means I'm supposed to keep going. But if something happens before Dayton, then I'll turn around and go back. And, Dayton's in the skyline. And I'm just like, I just got to get there. I get past Dayton. I keep going. I'm like, now this is it. There's no turning back. And then, damn it, wouldn't you know it, I wrecked. Like the snow is coming down. I ended up like catching the wheel in the edge of the snow. It pulled me into one guardrail, shot me across the freeway into the other guardrail, down into a ditch. Like some guy saw me run off the road. My sister comes all the way down to pick me up, takes me back up. I stay for a few days up at her house. I get some time to myself. And I decided, yep, this is exactly what I need to do. My friends offered that I can, get a place with him for a little bit, So we had started talking. I really started to fall for him. And so I was like, well, that might work. So I was like, I'll go home and I'll think about it for a couple weeks. We weren't like romantic yet or anything. So like at that point, I was like, this is a friend. And so I ended up getting a ride with my ex-husband's sister. And I remember it because the whole ride down, she just lectured me the whole time. And in front of her kids. And then at the very end, for the last hour, I had to pee so bad. I was like, I'm about ready to pee your car. But I also was like, I'm already shamed for, I don't want to be shamed for peeing my pants in her seat too.
So I would have punished her for lecturing me. I would have been like, joke's on you. I just pissed on your seat. Yeah. Peed on your seat, ma'am.
Yeah, I should have. Oh man. So I remember getting home and that $250, I ended up needing it for groceries, and I had to walk to the grocery store because now I have no vehicle. I'm trapped at the house. He's holding the kids from me, so it was a battle. It was a long battle, but I knew that the first thing I wanted to do was save up for a motorcycle. And
of course,
fight for my kids too, of course. So
which is also really beautiful and shows how much that the motorcycle was the thing always speaking to you, because even after the rape took place, that could have ruined your relationship with motorcycles. And it didn't. It stayed pristine in your mind, and it stayed. And so it was always the beacon of freedom. Yeah. And it was always meant to be in your life, because that's also profound, because a lot of time that could have just very easily destroyed that for you. And it doesn't sound like it even a little bit did.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think if anything, it probably fanned the flames more, like, well, now I just have to ride my own,
Yeah.
And so here we are. It's 2008. In February, I'm starting out on my own. I get back to the house from Michigan. First thing I do is turn that radio on to whatever station I want to listen to, closed all the curtains, and I danced for the first time ever. And there in my house by myself for 2 full songs. Finally was like, ooh, got that out of my system. Been holding that in for a long time.
Oh,
and
Christy and I are dancers, so that's why, like, not actual dancers, but like we love to dance.
Music,
love to dance, musical. And so yes, and so when we hear that, we're just like, I can't even imagine the euphoric feeling that must have felt to not be able to, and then to just be able to freely move and be like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, my hips can do this, oh my god. But it's just that's incredible. Simple, so simple, but so profound,
Yeah.
So once you started like embracing your freedom after this, I mean, as you say, like, that's the first time I danced. Like, you can't underestimate how much newness and how much opportunity, but also you lived in this fear state for so long and survival state for so long. So the minute you start to align, I know that because you've said universe a couple times, and Lori and I use the term. So how did it start to conspire with you once you were flowing with it? Because following your story, it seems like so many incredible things have entered your path, which obviously you being at the helm, actively participating and allowing all of that to happen all of a sudden.
I think the business was a huge help, having that to fall back on, because I didn't have a GED, high school education, college degree, anything. I'd never worked outside the home. There was a lot of culture shock through the first few years. I'd never drank alcohol, gone to a bar or a club. So I was 30 years old and I'd just gotten out. There was a lot of experiencing to do of life. I ended up, after the 2 weeks, I ended up deciding to get into a relationship with and move in with this man that we'd been friends, that had helped me talk me out a little bit. And that lasted about a year before I was just like, you know what? He doesn't even like motorcycles. I really want to ride. Like, I want to go do all this stuff. Like, I think I just need to be alone. Right after leaving him, I let the church, because I was still kind of going to church, still struggling with the custody battle. And I remember the church really pressuring me, like, you should move closer. We'll keep an eye on you. We'll take care of you. We'll help you. I was really struggling financially, racking up credit cards at the time just to survive, trying to rebuild my business on my own with my new limited schedule, trying to get the kids and visitation with them a few days a week too, just trying to go back and forth between the two families. Like, it's a whole puzzle that has to be put together. And as the business started to grow and all, I ended up moving back. Within the first couple weeks of being there, I'd met this neighbor that was like, called me one day in a frantic, and he was like, I really need a place to stay. And me and my two boys occasionally. And I'm like, well, I guess you can stay in my basement. And this was the beginning of maybe another series, or another episode, but like, I ended up in this relationship with him that lasted 4.5 years. He was very violent and physically abusive. So we're talking like broken nose, broken rib, black eye, like head smashed against a wall, and just trying the whole time too to not let that out and not let, like, that never happened around the kids. But I was so worried it would make me lose my kids that I was trying so hard to keep the peace and just do whatever again, just so that he wouldn't lash out. Because when things did go well, or he stopped drinking, like, it did get a little better. But I ended up finally getting out of that in 2014. And I got, the day that I cut that off, that I finally cut it off, like, I went back to get, he was driving a pickup truck that I'd owned. It was just this cheap little Chevy S10. So I go back to reclaim my pickup. I'm driving it back. I stole it back from the bar the night before. So at closing time, he came out and the truck was gone. So I parked it at a nearby tow lot with the help of the tow company. I go back the next day to go get it. I'm driving home, and I get this call from this lady that works on this movie Carol with Cate Blanchett in it. And they wanted somebody to sew all the drapes and upholstery for this movie. And they're like, are you up to this? And I was like, hell yes, I am. I ended up enlisting the help of one other girl to help me get this job done. But my first paycheck, I was able to pay off a bunch of debts. The second paycheck, I got my first motorcycle with it. So
that's incredible.
Yeah. I was like, the first one goes to Bill's. Next one is motorcycle. So there was $4,000 cash for my first 2003 CBR. I didn't even get to, I test rode it down the street briefly, and that was it. I was like, this is the one, I know it. I had no help. I didn't know anybody who rode. I didn't have anybody go with me. I had an old friend that I tried to reach out to say, like, could you go with me and look at this? But I just did all the research on myself, showed up there, rode it, came back. I was like, here's the money. And they're like, well, we can ride it home for you. And then, you know, that way you got it at your house. So the next day, you're like, I wanted to sleep out there with the bike the first night. I'm like, I'm so excited. It's like, this has finally happened. And you know, it's a downhill from there because I've had several bikes since then. But fast forward a few years, I ended up getting cancer. And this was like 5 years ago. I lose track of years easily. So the ADHD, it's really bad. Ended up on a trip. This trip last year was a result of when I had cancer, realizing that, you know, I really need to start taking care of myself more too. As a mother, you know, we put all of our energy and love into our children. And that was the biggest thing, is I wanted my kids, though, to see me happy and healthy. And I started seeing trends of, like, they would follow me, the type of men I dated, they would date, or the type of things I did with my life. They would, you know, oftentimes that swayed their decision-making abilities. And I ended up, when I had cancer, I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to go travel across the states by myself. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a Jeep and I'm going to do it. So I got a Jeep, and it took another like 4 or 5 years, or 4 years. Yeah. So it was like it was 2023 when I got invited to a birthday party track day in Colorado. And I was like, this is it. This is my reason to go on my trip. So I'm just going to make it a whole cross country trip. I'm going to drive all the way across, take my bike with me. I don't think the Jeep would make it anymore. So I got to get a vehicle to do that with. So I started doing research of what would fit my bike in it so that I could have everything contained and not have to have a trailer. So I found this bus. I did all the measurements of like the ambulance at the fire station. I went down to the fire station, was like, let me get the measurements. Nope, that won't work, the way I want it to. So went through each thing, and I thought, well, if I did a shuttle bus and I put it in my business's name and I operated my business out of my bus too, now my trips are all write-offs and I can work along the way. So then I did that, and my business kept growing too. So that was fantastic. Did a lot of jobs on big movie projects, did like set decorating for a Jack Harlow New Balance shoe commercial, Beats by Dr.
I am
Dre, Pepsi
such
commercial
insane
with the
goosebumps. I
Bengals.
wish
Like,
you could see them.
I know.
I
It's
love it.
growing. It's been amazing, the
Mhm,
opportunities that have
mhm.
come my way. So this trip, I go all the way out west on this trip. I make meet a million amazing people. And you know what I really found is, who am I when you strip everything else in the world away? All the opinions of other people, all the standards, all the beliefs. Where do you want to go to eat? What do you want to do today? All of that's stripped away. When you go on a trip out by yourself, no matter whatever you take, here I am out on the other side of the country. I get my motorcycle out. I take a ride on a country road if I feel like it. I get back in, I drive, I camp wherever I want. And I really found who I was away from everything else. And it was on that trip, I remember sitting in front of a beautiful bonfire, a little bit under the influence of something very special. And in that
Is it
moment,
magical, perhaps?
it was very magical.
Yeah, I was like, we know
It's
what you're
very
throwing down.
magical.
We actually have stores now in in BC that you can
That's
just go buy them,
fantastic.
which is great.
That is fantastic. Yes. I was there in the mountains, sitting out west end of this beautiful sunset, and just really felt this move in my heart to start sharing my story more publicly, because there's a lot of women out there that are still in the same cold or in something similar, or even just women that are trapped in this belief that they need to put others before themselves, or that they need to please the world, that they need to earn the attention or the appreciation or approval of somebody else. And I'm like, is there a way that I can reach these women with this story? Because like, this is not for waste. It's not just so Christina can have some grand adventure all across the country. No, there's a reason behind all of this. And, help other women feel as free and as happy. So on the trip, then the following year, I ended up getting the opportunity and met with some people, and they're like, you have your bike right here in your bus with you? And I'm, yeah. And you're just corner working at this race. Why aren't you racing? And I'm like, well, I don't have my race license. They're like, all right, that's it. We're going to comp your license and your entry fees if you will get out there and race. I'm like, my bike isn't even race ready. And they're like, don't worry about that. We'll take care of all that. Like, you just get here tomorrow morning with your suit on and everything, your leathers. You can still work corners after your races, but you're racing tomorrow. And the next day, like that night, I remember being in the back of the bus. I'm at Summit Point, West Virginia. I'm in the back of the bus, taking off my rear pegs and my passenger seat and all, like trying to like make it look like as race worthy as possible. They gave me this metal turkey basting pan to like wire to the bottom of the bike just as an oil catch for the day. Putting this, whatever I can find for my number logos on this bike. And I get out there and I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. So I got to like never been to this racetrack before, never raced before. And I had been on the track riding for 10 years, though. I just never raced. And it was 5 months after I got my bike was my first track day. So it was obviously like, this has been in my heart for a long time. So I'm out there and I practice. I'm like, this is great. Like, I'm learning the turns, but I'm really slow. I'm like, I'm just out here to have fun. That's all. I go back to corner working, and it ended up, we lost a rider at my station, or at the station that I was at. Right before my race, I ended up holding the hand of this man as he passed away. And in that moment, just realizing again, like, everything in life always brings you to these points where you have a decision and your road can go either way. Like, I could be like, again, let fear take over, or worry, or so much sympathy and everything for the situation. But at the same time, realizing that this person passed away with the same kind of passion and love for motorcycles that I have. And if he'd heard my story, he'd be like, what the heck? You get out there and you better race. Like, you better be out there racing. So I remember just saying, I'm not going to cry about this right now. I'm going to like go out there. I'm going to do my best. And I can like think about that later. And I got out there and I did my first race. I came back in and I was like, oh my goodness, like, where has this been all my life? This is so much fun. So it's amazing. Like, again, we have those choices books, right? We have those opportunities. Every decision we make, we have a chance to go in one direction or the other, and choosing the direction that doesn't leave us with regrets. A couple quotes come to mind: fear regret more than fear failure. And I think Lori had said on one of your shows, you said, the reason we are so risk adverse is because we are so failure adverse. And that really spoke to me too. It was just about like how a lot of times we don't take the risks. We don't push towards our dreams and our goals because we fear not making it. But I would rather not make it, but try, than regret never trying, you know?
Oh, Christina, I just want to say, like, we're really honored that you joined our platform to share your story. And to me, your moment in the mountains when you had that deep calling and that deep knowing, I'm so happy that you were in a space to answer that call.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really do feel like this part of the story is so incredibly important, but I do feel as though we've just really like got the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more we want to ask you and go. So I think it's safe to
there's
say
a part two
that that there's a part two. If you'll have us again. But thank you for sharing that story, because even though so few people that listen will necessarily have the experience of a cult, I think as women, there's so much in your story, no matter what, that we all see ourselves, because we grew up in a society that's patriarchal, and that very much leaves us as women feeling that we have to hand off decisions, even if there's the unwritten rules or the subconscious aspects in which we're handing over our power, or we're needing to ask permission, or we're needing to do a check-in instead of a state of listening, and paying attention to those little things, the motorcycles or whatever it looks like in your life that says like, oof, go that way. Oof, pay attention there. Oh, that's a little hint. That's a little nudge, and not needing to turn around and check and ask someone, was that a nudge? If you hear and see that nudge, it is a nudge. You don't have to check in with anybody else, and you certainly don't need to check in with the masculine to see if that's the thumbs up or the go ahead for it. And so I think there's just so much in what you've shared today that that everybody listening can see themselves within. And even, for men, hearing and asking yourself, where are you in a state of subconscious dominance over? that doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve anybody, you know? So that's just kind of one of the things that really kind of popped into my head about it. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I know it's funny because for as many shows as I've gotten to see, it's surprising I haven't seen you guys so speechless for.
I don't think I have been so. I was just like in this. I was just like, sometimes I forget that I had a microphone because I was just like, oh,
I was a listener.
I was like
a listener.
I should keep talking, I guess.
Yes.
Like a little pause. I'll be like, little pause. I'll be like, I guess I'll just keep talking.
She's like drinking her drink. She's like, still nothing from them. Okay. I'll just
like, are they frozen? And did we lose them? Okay.
Yeah. Do we have a signal?
I was just like, and then like, I think that for me, that was the most. I was just like, you speak it so beautifully too, because I can see yourself not just going back there and you're not just telling the story of what happened. I can see you taking yourself back to those spaces and places and us reliving that with you alongside you. And so that's also why it didn't feel so much like a conversation as much as it felt like we were a witness to your story, which is a profound way to share your story, is for people to be a witness of.
I think it says a lot too for the fact that you guys have created such a beautiful, safe place for all of us to be able to share this platform that you have. It's amazing. And I felt very safe here today and very able to share. And I think that the whole takeaway is that I think women really can empower each other. And people in general can empower each other. But I come at it now from a place of, I think the most important thing in life is love. And, Bob Marley talked about it. You got the Beatles talk about it. All you need is love. It really is, when it comes down to the whole core of it, is when you love yourself, pursue your passions, you love others, it flows out through what you do. And I appreciate you guys and the places and the battles you guys have gotten through to bring yourselves to this point, to be able to have this platform so we could share. Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautifully said. And I truly hope, if you ever make your way this side of the border or vice versa, like we end up on different trips, like I would love the opportunity to meet in person. Like that's the one beautiful part of this, as well as like when we've had those opportunities, because we share such a moment and then you get to connect. And it's just like, to me, I always say, like when we ride, we have armor on, and the minute we're off our bikes, like the vulnerability armor comes down. And I think that's where we get the beautiful connection in this community. It's like none other. It's like none other. And even your story today, like just on a personal note, it's so fascinating when you're exactly where you need to be. And I just feel like even things that you shared and the lessons, I was like, oh, I needed to hear that reminder right now. So to the point that I said at the very beginning, where I'm like, even if just one person has that movement in their core, there were so many things that pinged and spoke to me that I needed to hear right now. So thank you.
Thank you. You guys have been awesome. It's been fun.
How do people find you? Where do people look for you on Instagram or any of the websites?
So Christina with the CH goes, and 2 underscores for Instagram. For YouTube, it's just Christina Goes. I'm actually working on a book right now too. So who knows when that'll be ready, but I'm 3 chapters in. So telling my whole story and putting a lot of tidbits of information in there that would be helpful to different people, especially people going through domestic violence. That has been a big one too, with what I encountered with that and trying to get out of that relationship. So if anybody ever needs to reach out for advice or tips or information for that too. But YouTube, Instagram, of course I'm on TikTok if it's up and running or stays, whatever. Hopefully I'll be able to have like a podcast or something here eventually soon too, just because there's a lot of like current things I'd like to talk about besides waiting until the book comes out. So yeah, YouTube is probably a good place for getting the full stories. So
Yeah, I've enjoyed, I've watched a bunch of them as well. If you want to be not just inspired by the soul, but also with like a can-do, make magic happen design, it was really cool to watch your builds. So.
Thanks. It was a fun project.
Well, that, my friends, is your motivation. You've just listened to the Motovation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motovation Podcast and visit our website at themotovation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.